What if the fear that's holding you back is actually the sign that you're meant to move forward? In today's episode, I sit down with Amy Ward, a global lawyer who has built a career by embracing uncertainty from the courtrooms of Australia to the Middle East and beyond. She shares what it was like to move to Dubai without a job, navigate cultural challenges, and why she believes resilience is built through repeated exposure to difficult situations. We dive into neurodivergence, the future of work, and how to feel the fear, but still do it anyways. If you're ready to stop playing it safe and start creating a life of impact, this episode is for you. Hi, I'm Mimi Zhang, and this is the Explore with Mimi podcast. In our first series, What If It All Works Out, we're diving into bold stories of people making huge life changes. It's raw, inspiring, and just maybe the nudge you need to take your own leap. Let's explore together. Hey, Amy, how's it going in Australia?
It's good. It's good, Mimi. It's great to see you. Really good to
Yes,
see you.
good to see you. Wow, it's been almost 6 months since I last saw you.
I know. We had such an amazing time in Ubud. I
Yeah,
met the best people there, including you.
yeah, that was awesome. I shout out to co-working in Ubud.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Outpost is what it
Outpost.
is, I think. Yeah.
Tell us about your journey so far.
I've had an interesting life. I'm a commercial and technology lawyer, but it's taken me a few kind of different steps to end up at this point. Grew up in Australia. I went to law school in Adelaide. My first job out of law school was actually as a criminal defense lawyer. For the first 3 years, I was wig and gown, like on TV and representing all kinds of people. But I knew that if I stayed doing that, that's all I would be able to do. And I had a big vision for my life. Having never been overseas before, a good friend of mine from uni, we had a think. It was quite common for lawyers to decide to get some international experience. We thought London, Hong Kong, and we settled on Dubai because it was booming. Having never been overseas before, I got on a plane and flew to Dubai and called law firms in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which was a brave thing to do looking back now because I was only 24, 25. But I secured a role with a great UK law firm in Abu Dhabi and moved there. And that started my love for the Middle East. I love the culture, the food, the language, and not just the Gulf region. I love what is known as the Levant, so Jordan, Syria, Palestine, and then also North Africa, Middle East, North Africa, Egypt, and so forth. I took an adult gap year and I learned Arabic in Syria, got caught up in the first uprising with the Arab Spring, spent a month in Jordan, a month in Beirut, and then 6 months in Bethlehem doing aid work. I did my master's in international development and I thought I wanted to work for the UN, but it's quite a big conglomerate, so I moved away from that. I came back to Australia and worked for our deputy with our Attorney General in South Australia. And then I went back to the Middle East to work in government, and I've been back 8 years. And most recently was working with Salesforce and currently with eBay. It's been this crazy journey, but I always think about what Steve Jobs said. You've probably heard it in one of his speeches. You can't connect the dots until you look back. And I've always just had this sense that whatever I'm doing is leading me to the next thing that is meant for me in life. And I think that's true.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to see where these different points in our life will lead us to where. Sometimes we're wondering, oh, is this the right next step? Is this the wrong next step? But I guess there's some element of faith as you're going along the path that it'll all work out and you'll connect the dots looking back. Do you ever wonder what your life would have looked like if you had stayed on the courtroom path, or you just never
Well,
think about?
yeah, no, it's funny. I was actually back in Adelaide recently and I was walking around the area where I used to work with a lot of colleagues. And so I went past this pub we would all go to for after work drinks. And there were people there that who were still there from 20 years ago. I
Wow.
actually had this is what life would have looked like if you'd stayed. And I was thanking my lucky stars that I didn't.
So you know.
Um, Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I definitely am glad that I took what was a big risk. And it was hard. For the first 6 months, I think I cried every day. And when I was in Abu Dhabi, I'd cross the day off on the calendar because I refused to go back. I was persistent about making it work, and it ended up being a place that I fell in love with, and it was absolutely where I was meant to be. But yeah, you're right, Mimi. It's good to have a minute to think back and go, what would life have been like if I'd taken the other path? And I had the chance to consider that recently, and it just reaffirmed that I had made the right decision to take these big risks when I
Yeah.
was young too. Yeah.
And it's also good that you acknowledge that in the beginning it was tough. That's something not everyone will mention, the tough part of the journey. Was there ever a particular moment that you felt the weight of a wrong decision as you were going along your path? And how did you navigate that?
Yeah, there were things that I hadn't planned for. In the Middle East at that time, you had to basically get a loan almost from the law firm
Mm.
because you had to pay rent a year in advance.
Oh.
There were things that I didn't expect, partly because I was in a different culture, partly because I was young. I hadn't worked for a top tier law firm before. I worked for two. The first one, I was navigating a role I didn't know how to do. But then when I went into the next role, I knew not what to do, like, and so what to do to make it hugely successful. But yeah, there were times when I cried to my parents, but I truly believe that I was meant to be in the Middle East at this time in my life. And looking at that step and connect the dots. I also think there's a golden thread in life, and
Mm-hmm.
I believed I was meant to be there. But because you sense you're meant to do something doesn't mean it won't take grit and perseverance and resilience on your part. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely has been that was part of when I was learning Arabic in Syria, when I was living in Bethlehem, even living in Brisbane, Australia when I first moved here. It's taken time to adjust, and there's always a level of resilience that life requires of you wherever you are, I think.
Were there any failures or a failure that turned out to be a blessing in disguise later on?
I think the first role in Abu Dhabi not working well taught me how to do it well.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually has helped me in every job I've had because
Mm-hmm.
I realize that the success you have in a new role depends on your ability to hit the ground running, which
Mm-hmm.
often depends on the training and the onboarding you get from the company. And I realized that in the absence of that in the first role, I wasn't able to be successful early on and hit the ground running and get some runs on the board simply because that piece of the puzzle was missing. So I made sure I got that at the next role, and I've made sure to the extent the company can provide that in all other roles so that I can be successful. So that's a bit about answering your question and a bit of just general advice to anyone, career advice to
Yeah,
anyone, yeah, listening.
I would agree. I think in some environments, there is not that much onboarding and support. I think when I've seen in smaller tech startups, my background is more in the tech startup world.
Mhm.
That can be a bit of a challenge when they are strapped for time, resources, or people where they want to get stuff moving fast. But the
If they move fast, yeah.
but then if there's not enough onboarding, coaching, it is a two-way street if you think about it. You
Yeah,
also
I definitely
invest
think
in
that.
employees and get them ramped up.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people that are scared of moving to a new country, let alone a new city or state or province. For folks that are considering making that leap, what are small steps they can build to have courage to move to a new city or country? Yeah.
One thing I do is excuse me, think about the worst case scenario and get comfortable with that. Basically, say you are moving to a new city and you go, what happens if I haven't made friends in a year? And then you go at that point, and then I would brainstorm what I would do if that was the case. And I would brainstorm how I could make sure I've given myself the best chance to make friends through meetup or running clubs or whatever. And then I would say, if I've done all of that and I still haven't made friends in a year, then I'll give myself the green light to come back. Or I think, what if I go and the job I've got is not what I thought it would be? What can I do if that is the case? And then I would brainstorm that. That way, I think you prepare yourself for things that might not go to plan. And then you give yourself an inner roadmap to navigate challenges that come up. And I think sometimes we gravitate towards the what if it doesn't work out? But what if it does? That's the exciting part. You'd never know on any given day if you're going to meet, if you're single, you might meet your partner, you might meet your best friend, you might meet an investor, you might meet a business partner, you might have a great cup of coffee. I think it's natural for us to go, what if it doesn't work out? But I equally think, what if it does?
I love that. And while we're on that topic of knocking on doors for a job in a different country, you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier that you did cold calling or cold
Mm.
emailing. Do you have any tips to share? I think the job market right now is pretty competitive, but maybe you have some tips and tricks that,
I'm not afraid of reaching out to
yeah.
anybody that I feel I want to speak to. I'm starting a master's in neuroscience this year. And there's a great guy in Australia who's doing some interesting stuff in the intersection of kind of tech and cognition and neuroscience. And so I got his contact details and reached out a sincere email about what I'm thinking about and would he be open to a conversation to talk about how we're a little aligned. And I sent a similar thing to another girl who works in the US. I think we're often afraid of what people might think of us if we reach out. But I also think maybe they'll be impressed or think, wow, there's another like-minded soul who thinks similarly. That's the first thing. I'll take a leap of faith. I do use LinkedIn a lot to connect with people who I admire or strategically I want to network with. I actually think I haven't done this yet, but I think this is coming. It might be that rather than reacting to job advertisements, we actually go, these are the 10 companies I want to work for, put together a slick CV and cover letter, a 30-second to 1 minute little video clip where you can introduce yourself and bring some color and life to your CV. And I think sending someone on LinkedIn a message saying, I'm interested in working for you, here's my CV. I've got a 30-second clip about why I want to work for the company and putting some color to my CV. I haven't done that yet, but I plan to do that. And I think some of your listeners might see some merit in that as well.
I think you're spot on. The other thing I would add is in the past, when I've done my job search, I do try to go through referrals. I always have case studies of my past results as well. And that can be done in video form. I have to anonymize the name of the
Yeah.
company I work for, but I'll be this customer came in and this is how we grew or expanded or implemented the solution. Or I'll have some visuals of how much that I've sold. I was in sales. So those types of things.
Numbers talk in your sector.
Yeah.
Hey, I love that idea. Having
Yeah.
worked at
Yeah.
big tech companies closely with sales, yeah, I hear
It's
what you're
all
saying. I
numbers,
know what
right?
you're about. Numbers, but the numbers don't lie.
What do you think is the biggest misconception people have starting over in a new place?
When you first move somewhere, it's super exciting. There's kind of the rose-colored glasses phase where everything's exciting and new, and you're exploring and finding new bars and restaurants and parks and things to do and perhaps a new apartment. But eventually that kind of wears off and you're not, and that's where that grit and resilience and perseverance comes in because it can be quite lonely. I think unless you're moving somewhere where you've already got some established friends, you are in a process of meeting new people. I think the combination of moving to a new city, starting a new job, and moving into a new place, cumulatively, they are difficult things. They're difficult on their own, but put them all together, and that's hard work. It's sheer hard work. I would say don't give up. Don't feel despair or a sense that it's not going to work out. Realize that the first part of settling in requires an inner resilience. But once you are established somewhat, the best things start to happen. Doors open, you meet people, you might get to travel to other places. It's exciting. It does take a level of inner strength. And sometimes you've got to push through and have a cry and cross the day off on your calendar. And know that it's a new day the next day.
That's solid. Okay. Get a calendar and cross off the days. I've never heard that advice, but hey, it could work. You're giving me flashbacks of when I first moved to Silicon Valley. It was
Yeah.
definitely an adjustment, but it was my dream to move there. And I got to move there right after college.
Wow.
What helped was having a community and meeting people. I think the communities that I ended up meeting in the beginning were mostly through the startup community or through 500 startups. They back a lot of companies, and I met more people through that. I got jobs and I think an internship initially and then some jobs through that 500 startups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess you had to take active steps, hey, to like
Yeah.
on your own turn up to these events and have courage, and probably was a bit tough initially, but look at what came out of it. It was amazing for you.
Yeah. It was interesting because in my senior year, I had this feeling that I wanted to go to Silicon Valley, but I didn't know how. I ended up tweeting at someone who got me a paid
Oh,
internship.
love it.
And
Love
then
it.
they
That's
were
like an
part of,
Amy.
great. And they were part of the 500 startups network. And I think at this point, they probably have more than 500 startups in their network. That's how it all panned out. And I'm thinking through all of this, there's a certain thread. Is there a life model or a quote that you to live by?
Yeah, I think I've looked at collectively where we are at the moment in society. We've got some big challenges ahead of us. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of voices out there, some negative, some positive. But I think for me, I've got this burning message that I want to share with the world. And I'm going to read it out because I've recently been crafting kind of what this message is. But essentially, I've set up what is a idea or a way of being. It's called We Choose. But essentially, the world is constantly shaping us. It's not about if we're being shaped, but by what. We Choose is more than a name. It is an invitation to a conversation and a conscious decision about who we are and who we choose to become. Let's do so with intentionality. So I think it's easy to certain people on Instagram or watch the news or read certain books. But if we're not intentional about it, then we don't realize that all of that information is somehow forming us. And I'd like to encourage people to be a little more intentional about what they're consuming. This is now the kind of umbrella I have for some of the work that I'm interested in. I'm seeing, and there's technology predictions all the time. By the time this kind of goes out, when Mimi, when you put it out into the world, whatever my prediction is, it probably will have changed. But I think we are moving to an agentic labor force. The people that will be continually employed will need to deliver high value cognitive output. And in order to do so, we need strong metabolic health. So this looks moving away from a return to office 5 days a week. It means constant movement, good nutrition, sleep in order to produce focus work. I think it's important that we have AI literacy. I'm interested in being intentional about how we support Generation Alpha. So that's the kids who were born between 2010 and 2025. And so they are going to be the ones that are making decisions in the future. Yet they're the generation that are facing some of the most difficult things than any other generation before them in terms of climate change, financial instability, housing, geopolitical instability, AI technology. And yet they're the ones that were device driven, lower attention span, less play, which is important for cognitive development, and were in COVID, essentially. I'm interested in how we can intentionally support that generation. And I've got some other initiatives about how we can intentionally look at tools within lawmaking and legislation. And then eventually I want to have some merch that says choose who it is you are becoming. So choose community, choose rest, choose to be countercultural, choose kindness. I think my journey so far has brought me to this point, and these are the things that I want to work on, and I'll continue to be a commercial and technology lawyer for now on the side, and we'll see what happens. But this is where I've ended up now. And I think that there's still a golden thread. Let's have another chat in 5, 10 years and see what's happened. But I'm very committed to this concept of we choose. Yeah.
I think we will continue to evolve. And all those things that you say make a lot of sense. I think there's some sort of collective consciousness, some sort of shift. People are becoming more intentional, more aware. There seems to be more of a shift towards mental health, wellness in general. We have the physical health, but there's also energetic health. So I completely hear you. I think health is first priority, energetic, mental, and physical, because if you don't have your health, how can you effectively give your energy to others through the day? How can you effectively function? If you don't have health, it's hard to do any of the other things if you have an illness. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you and I were on this, we've been on this same journey in the last 12 months, understanding metabolic health and energetic health. The people that get this, I think, are going to be the ones that stand out in the workforce or in our communities because we can do so much more if we're not burdened by illness or tiredness or disease or addiction or sleeplessness or whatever it is,
Mhm.
because we're going hard after health. I love that. I love our joint commitment to that.
And if you're looking at merch, I don't know if you've looked at something like Printful, Printify, or Gelato, the print on demand. Could be one way to kick
Yeah,
your merch journey. So
thank you. Actually, I have heard of gelato and I have been wanting to check it out. So the sign.
you mentioned earlier grit and resilience. So how does one build that sense of resilience?
I think it comes from repeatedly exposing yourself to difficult circumstances. When I first moved to Abu Dhabi, my resilience was not strong, and so hence the crying in the calendar. But by the time I moved to Syria a few years later, I remembered, okay, the period of time where you've moved somewhere and it's new and difficult, it doesn't last forever. I know I can get through that. Know that the challenges of moving to a new place in terms of finding a local grocery store or finding a local doctor or making new friends, I know that takes time and energy. And when you're starting a new job and do it at the same time, I need to look after myself because I look back as to how I handled it last time and perhaps I can handle it a bit differently by taking my time or getting more rest or planning it a little differently. I think we only build that grit and resilience by repeatedly doing hard things. I love Glennon Doyle and her wife. They've got that motto, we can do hard things.
Mm.
And sometimes I have to remind myself, even in Brisbane, it's been a little tough lately, and we can do hard things. I have to remind myself. Glennon Doyle's saying that's what builds the grit and resilience, I think. And it does take a level of belief that you can do it. You can get through it, it won't last. And I think the health habits also support that. So good sleep, good nutrition, movement, um,
Mindset. Yeah.
mindset. When you're feeling strong mentally and physically, you're much better equipped to deal with the stress that comes with perhaps moving to a new place where you need grit and resilience.
Separately, you've told me one of your quotes is feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah, that's me. I think I've got a bit of a high risk tolerance. I don't know that many people that would move to Syria, but to be fair, this was before the Arab Spring. And actually, the people that I met there were truly extraordinary. Other students who were learning Arabic. One of my friends, he went on to establish Monzo Bank in the UK. There were a couple of top tier journalists from Australia and from the UK. There was a guy doing awesome stuff in microfinance. So that was a bit of a tangent, but basically, there are amazing people there, and I'm glad I did that. I want to reiterate that
Mm.
people who do courageous things, whether it's moving to a new city or a new country or any courageous thing, they're not wired differently. Like it's not they don't have the fear. It's still there, but you feel the fear and you do it anyway. I have taught myself that it's always going to be there. So you need to take the action regardless. I think there's this misconception that people who do courageous things somehow don't have the fear factor. That's not true. They do. We feel the fear and do it anyway. Yeah.
There's different levels
Mhm.
of risk tolerance that people have. And some people naturally have a high risk tolerance. I think
Okay, that would be me.
I
That
think
would
that
be
would be
me.
you. I also have a higher risk tolerance. Not everyone
Yeah.
would take a sabbatical. If someone doesn't have a high risk tolerance to begin with, over time they can start adding on more to that. Or is you still do it scared?
Yeah. I think there are people who are blessed with a higher risk tolerance, like us. It has come at a cost, though, for me. How some people say you want to get to your deathbed and you don't want to have any regrets. It's because of the action you didn't take. I think back and I think, what if you've got regrets because of the action you did take? Because you've got such a high risk tolerance, you did different things and things didn't work out. That is part of my story. There are things that did not work out, friendships or jobs or moves. And that is because I have a high risk tolerance. I was reading recently, though, I love the work of Mel Robbins, but she was basically encouraging people in their 20s. That's a great time. I think you should take risks whenever you feel you're called or the universe is pulling you in a certain direction, whatever that might be. But I think in your 20s is a good time to take some risks. You've got the energy, you've got an opportunity to open yourself up to all sorts of opportunities. You mentioned that you got an internship, and I imagine you were in your 20s when you went to
Oh
Silicon
yeah,
Valley.
it was in my early 20s. Was I 23? I actually also left Silicon Valley sometime in my mid 20s, but somehow keep going back there for
Oh, it's
some
like me in the
reason.
Middle East.
So I can't get away from Silicon Valley. But anyways, I had a quarter life crisis when I was in my mid 20s, and I moved to Taiwan, and I lived in England too. But that's a separate
Oh,
story.
that's awesome. Oh, I love that. I love that. That's good.
20s can be a good time. You're younger, maybe you have less commitment. Some people are not in serious
Mhm.
relationships. You can be in serious relationship. It might be a little harder through
Mm.
some of these transitions if you're moving to another country, or you might not have a mortgage yet or kid, and so it's a little easier. I think sometimes
Yeah.
when you're 30s or 40s or 50s, it could be tougher. Maybe by then you have a mortgage, you have a dog, cat, you have kids, you're married
It's,
plans. It's possible. It might get a little harder. And also, people have gotten farther ahead in their careers typically.
I think in your 20s, you want to expose yourself to different. I think it's difficult to know exactly what you want to do when you come out of university or college. By exposing yourself to different roles or companies or sectors, you then become better equipped to decide, oh, well, I'm interested in this, or I want to pursue that, or I've met these amazing professionals.
Mhm.
I think that's also why doing hard things or taking risks in your 20s is a powerful move and can set you up for the future.
That makes sense. And I think we were talking a little bit about neurodivergence. I don't think it's a topic that I know that much about. So, how would
Mm.
you define neurodivergent?
It's actually become quite a hot topic in Australia. I'm not sure if it's being talked about more in other countries, but neurodivergence is you've got this idea of neurotypical. So most people in the population, their brains are wired in what would be a neurotypical way. But then there is a percentage of the population that are considered neurodivergent, where their brains are wired in a slightly different way. And they would have things known autism or ADHD or giftedness, high sensitivity. And so this is the proportion of the population that would identify as neurodivergent. And I found out I was neurodivergent probably about 5 or 6 years ago, which was a real blessing because it has helped me understand myself better and how I work and why some things hadn't worked in the past and but how to set myself up for success going forward, knowing that perhaps I'm wired a bit differently than the everyday population. But there's a lot of neurodivergent people out there, so it's not me on my own, but I need to do things a little differently to everyday peeps in the office and so forth.
Are there any moments where it was a superpower?
I mean, some people in the neurodivergent community in Australia think it's cringe when people talk about it being a superpower, but I actually think it's an empowering way to talk about it. One thing about how I work is that I work very quickly. I can analyze and synthesize information very quickly, and I can deliver output in a quarter of the time that I guess it takes most lawyers. And this isn't to boast or anything. This is the reality of the fact that I have a fast processing speed as part of my neurodivergence. And so I think that is a superpower because my productivity is perhaps a little more enhanced. And I love that. It does have its downsides though, because not every paid position can provide enough work when you can get it done in, a short period of time. The ability to focus and deliver, it's a real superpower.
Is there
Yeah.
any advice that you would give to other neurodivergent professionals?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I'm having to look to them for advice at the moment in the
Mm.
community. Love working remotely and flexibly for two reasons. One is, as someone who's neurodivergent, I tend to work in focus bursts as opposed to an 8 hour slow burn, which is what the world is used to. So flexible and remote work enables me to do that kind of focus burst work, but I'm always available a little bit longer than I guess traditional employees. I don't mind getting messages on my phone at crazy times and so forth. Remote work culture during COVID, it was quite strong. And I've been disheartened to see this kind of push for a return to the office because I find working in an office difficult with the distractions and the noise and the water cooler chit chat, which when I'm there, Kobe Sanchez
Is
doing
she
some really cool.
the small business
Yeah, but
owner?
she had a clip recently and she was like, your high performers, they're not there to have the chit chat around the water cooler. They're there to get their work done and do it well and do it quickly. And I was, amen to that, sister. Yeah, I'm having to seek out support from my own neurodivergent community about having the courage in interview stages to say that I might not be able to do a full 5 days in the office, or I prefer to be fully remote, or whatever it is. So I encourage people who are also identifying as neurodivergent to see the skills that they bring as a superpower, as an asset, not a liability, but to be honest and upfront about what is needed. Because if the employer is benefiting from your incredible efficiency or giftedness or ability to think outside the square or the box, whatever the saying is, then I think it's fair to ask for some accommodations to support your ability. Because I think with neurodivergence, it's not in the workplace either. Sometimes if I have a lot of socializing, I can feel drained and need some downtime to recover. There's some great literature and lots of great people who are leaders in this space who talk about how to build in habits and tools and techniques for managing neurodivergence because we live in a neurotypical world. We don't always fit in and it's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think how companies generally work these days is it feels most companies are doing one size fits all.
Yeah.
But in reality, each individual is very different on how they thrive and work best. When I was working in sales, I do prefer working remote. And I've worked remote for many years because I can take calls, Zoom calls from my home. There's no distractions.
Mm.
Or if I'm traveling, like I'll go meet with the client and build those in-person relationships. But I think I would be more distracted if I was going to the office every day and taking calls because I need to focus and I need quiet space. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you talk about this one size fits all because I don't think it's actually about neurodivergence. If you think about it, there's some information out there about the workday works well for men because they have a 24-hour kind of hormone cycle where their testosterone peaks and rises in a 24-hour period. But as we know for women, our hormones fluctuate over a month. And then you think about circadian rhythms. Some people are early birds, some people work late. Sometimes you're not feeling 100%, or sometimes you're feeling 110%. This is why the idea of the cookie cutter robot turning up day after day without taking into account, it doesn't allow that flexibility, which I think would give people a chance to thrive. And that's why I'm a big flexible work advocate. And also, I think the office environment doesn't encourage what I call 5 minute snack movement. Casey Means is a great author, and she talks about how contracting muscles is medicine. So basically, it helps with your mitochondria and energy. So sometimes I try and do some squats, or I'll go up and down the stairs in my apartment building for a couple of minutes each hour because I don't think you can sit down for 8 hours, have a dormant metabolic system, and think that going to the gym for an hour after work is going to somehow offset that dormant metabolic system. It's not. Yeah, in addition to the neurodivergence and the fact that we're not robots and the fact that metabolic health is so critical, it's a reason why I'm a big advocate for flexible work. And I often have to say to people, no, it's not because I want to be able to put the washing on at home. It's literally like a holistic, intentional way of living and working.
Yeah. And work-life balance. That's a big one. I think that
Yeah.
it's different for everyone. But as you mentioned, having more flexibility in our work can help better support our lives, which in turn better support our work. It all
Yeah.
it all
I think,
together.
yeah, it all fits. And I think if you've got thriving employees, you've likely got thriving bottom line meaning KPIs and happy customers. I am interested to see how companies like Amazon go with. I was disappointed to see that they set the tone for a 5-day return to office. It seemed counterintuitive to how the tech industry had been working for many years. And I think if we miss thriving, happy, then we can't be surprised if we're not achieving KPIs or seeing an increase in the bottom line.
Going back to you've lived in so many different places and you've worked in different types of environments. Like in the Middle East, you've worked in law firms, you've worked in the courtroom, you've worked in tech companies now. So these are vastly different cultural contexts. How
Mm.
does this influence your understanding of identity and belonging?
Yeah, I have actually been in so many different sectors and industries, private sector, public sector, government, all sorts of industries. I think the benefit of all of that is that I've come out with a much greater sense of knowing what interests me, what I'm good at, what I'm not so good at, and how I can best contribute to society. I was fortunate to grow up. My parents were principals in schools, and education was an important value in our family. And I was born with this inherent kind of diligence and pursuit of excellence. I'm not quite sure why, probably the neurodivergence, but I felt so grateful that I was given that opportunity that I feel it's incumbent upon me to somehow give back. And we've got increasing inequality all around the world in terms of who can access technology education. AI literacy is a big passion of mine because I could see how those that don't have access to understanding how AI is changing the workforce or changing how we do work, do life could fall behind and the inequality gap widen. It's cemented in me that I want to somehow be contributing my skills, talent, experience, the opportunity I was given to have such a good quality of life and education so young, contribute that back. And to that end, I've got a pretty ambitious project called MyGov Global, but it occurred to me when we were in Bali, the footpaths weren't great. I don't know if you saw that as well.
The footpaths are awful.
Oh, and the traffic, and it just
Yeah.
kind of me thinking Australia's got great footpaths. I don't know what it's like in
Do you mean
Denver.
the sidewalk?
Yeah,
The
the sidewalk. Sorry,
Oh
the
yeah,
sidewalk.
that's something my boyfriend he complains about in Bali. Other than that, I think
Yeah,
he likes Bali, but he doesn't like the sidewalks
the
are
sidewalks.
not.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it got me thinking, and I realized that countries operate a little bit siloed companies, and yet some countries are great at having legislation and policies and frameworks and regulations so that things run smoothly. We've got local councils that make sure our sidewalks are safe and repaired and so forth. And it made me think with the ability now for us to access information so quickly and so broadly that I'm developing this software solution where any policy member of parliament, anyone in legislation in any country can put in their information about, say, their population, their budget, their region, and ask for best practices in maintaining sidewalks from other countries around the world, rather than that person having to reinvent the wheel and have a think about how do we fix our sidewalks. Perhaps the province in Bali and Ubud, they can say, what are the best practices in Malaysia or another country that's similar to ours, tailor the legislation, produce it, and then put it into Parliament. It, I want to encourage this cross communication of best practice in governance and legislation so that countries can start to tackle, say, recycling or youth crime, safety, by looking at what other countries are doing and what best practice is available. It's an ambitious project. I'm probably going to be focusing on the sidewalk issue as a use case, but this is where I think if I could get this off the ground, then I think it would make a big difference for a lot of people and perhaps reduce the time it takes for countries who are reinventing the wheel, slowly drafting legislation to fix issues in the community.
That's awesome. I don't think I've ever heard of anything that existing. Would it be the first of its kind?
Absolutely. I haven't either. I'm currently looking to have discussions with people who can perhaps help on the tech heavy side. It could be that I'm thinking a little bit ahead of my time. I don't, I think from the research I've done so far, there'd be quite a bit of heavy lifting to even do that one small use case. I think as technology develops very quickly, in 2 years, we might be in a position where there's not so much heavy lifting required. But I'm going to keep tackling it. I do believe in this cross kind of global governance collaboration. And my mum said to me, "Oh, don't you think countries want to keep their information to themselves about how they run their country?" But a lot of this information is already public knowledge. There's databases in nearly every country with copies of legislation and white papers and policy papers. And there are definitely countries who are leading in best practice in certain things. So Denmark does some cool stuff in recycling cans. And I know Kerala's doing some, in India's doing some cool stuff as well in terms of environment. Costa Rica is leading the way in a lot of different areas. If we could tap into the existing knowledge that's there and then tailor it to, the budget, terrain, population of certain countries or provinces, the time it's currently taking to develop solutions in countries would dramatically reduce.
I think probably what currently happens is if a country has a certain problem they're trying to solve, maybe around recycling or sidewalks, they might try to like look step by step what other countries are doing, but they have to go different places to find this information, or they talk to their colleagues or people that they know in different countries. I can see why it would be a lengthier type of process. I think with how technology is progressing, there's even no code solutions that you
Mm.
could kind of create a website. I mean, there's no code solutions. And I'm not sure if some of the stuff is also in Chat GPT or if it's categorized correctly, but there probably some sort of legal databases that might have a lot of this information, as you probably found. I think if you are trying to make this could be a reality sooner or faster than you anticipate, maybe even sooner than two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. I actually worked in government on legislation and how legislation develops and the policy behind it. And you'd be surprised, not a lot of countries think to look at what other countries are doing. And it's surprising. Or they might look to, say, in the Pacific, Fiji might look to Samoa and Tonga, or in the Middle East, for example, the countries in the Gulf will look Abu Dhabi will look to Dubai, or the UAE will look to Saudi, rather than looking beyond their neighbors, or even not looking at all and literally coming up with solutions themselves.
Mhm.
So it is amazing to me that this cross kind of communication about best practice in areas of social and community living is, it doesn't, to my knowledge, it doesn't happen to the extent that it could, and the benefits could be immense for populations.
Definitely. I think that is an awesome and ambitious project. So, best wishes. You'll get it done.
Thank you.
If you could summarize everything that you've learned into one guiding principle for life, what would it be?
I absolutely love this line by Mary Oliver, which says, "What is it you will do with this one wild and precious life?" And I think sometimes we get caught up in the humdrum. I definitely think we get caught up in mediocrity. We let habits slide or poor habits come in. We don't give 100% to our work. We're short with our friends or partner or kids. We have one precious life. And I think at the end of my life, what do I want to look back and say and think and reflect on? And I give it my all. I honestly, I give life my all. I squeeze every ounce out of it. And my friends do joke that my best friend says, "Say what you want about Amy Ward, but she gets shit done." I get things done. My other friend, she says, "You take action, you take it fast, you don't talk about it." She loves that go-getter instinct. I'm grateful that my friends see that. But I don't take life for granted, and I challenge myself and I want to give back. And so we've got one wild and precious life, and I would encourage people to reflect on that. What is it that they want to say at the end of their life that they did? No regrets. Do you know that film?
Yeah, no regret. I thought that was a tattoo. No regrets.
No regrets. That's also my motto.
So, if someone feels connected to your story, how can they learn more about you or get in touch?
Yes, I've got a Substack newsletter called We Choose. So they can look me up there. www.wechoose.au has got all the information about what I'm doing, including my email address on the website, and a contact form. So, look, I would also please do reach out on LinkedIn under Amy Elizabeth Ward. I love having conversations with people who are thinkers, who are thinking about some of the big things in life. So if any of what I've said today resonates, then yeah, I would love to have a chat or a coffee or a Zoom chat coffee with anyone.
Cool. I'll drop those links too in
Thanks.
the summary. So thanks, Amy. I appreciate your time today. You are courageous. Not everyone would move countries multiple times in their career, and you feel the fear, yet you do it anyway.
Thanks, Mimi. At the end of the day, it might not work out. What if it does?
What if it works out?
That's it. See ya.
That's it for this episode of Explore with Mimi. If today's story got you thinking, laughing, or maybe even planning your next big leap, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. It might be just what they need too. Remember, no matter where life takes you, what if it all works out? I'll see you next time.